All right, y'all. Here we go. One thing I forgot to mention. There's another fight. Uh, Werdum versus Nelson. I totally forgot about that. It slipped my mind. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get that fight out of the way, and then of course I'm gonna do the co and main event. But Fabricio Werdum versus Roy Nelson. This is going to be a very distinct matchup, for lack of a better term, in every sense of the word, because you've got a guy that weighs twice as much as Werdum, and I'm going to be interested to see how Fabricio Werdum is going to be able to grapple with a man of this size. Now, as far as Big Country Nelson goes, it'll be interesting to see, if he's able to find the chin of Werdum, because Werdum is the taller fighter, and no doubt he'll have the reach advantage. And also, we're gonna see if Werdum's striking can match up with Roy Nelson's. So, therefore, I think that Werdum, I think he's just gonna have to, he's gonna have to find a way to wrestle this guy. And I know that's weird, saying that about Fabricio and everything, but seriously, because how in the world is this guy gonna possibly be able to pull guard on Roy Nelson? Seriously. And we know that Werdum's wrestling is not up to par. So if he can't do that and the fight stays standing, how is he possibly going to be able to submit Big Country, or win the fight in general? So it's a very, like I said, it's a very distinct matchup. I really think it's a bad matchup, in my opinion, because Roy Nelson is tough as hell, number one. He's got a very hard chin, number two. He's much heavier than Werdum, number three. And he's a better striker than Werdum, number four. So I'm not the one to underestimate anybody, even though I have underestimated Werdum in big fights recently, and I paid for it. But seriously though, I just don't understand how he's going to be able to get this guy to the mat. He can't pull guard on him because he's he's much heavier than he is. And then number two, his chin is very hard, so I don't know how Fabricio Werdum's gonna think that he's gonna be able to knock this guy out. So I don't know. I really don't know. With Werdum, I don't know. Now, Roy Nelson, I could name, a Christmas list of ways he can win the fight. Because, number one, and most importantly, when it comes to Werdum versus guys who can strike, more importantly, powerful strikers. With Werdum, he gets destroyed. I mean, look what happened, the last time he was in the UFC with JDS. I mean, come on. I mean, sure, he beat Alistair Overeem, but I mean, you saw what happened in the last fight, even though, it wasn't the most impressive fight of Overeem's career, but, still, Werdum didn't want to stand up with Overeem. And when he beat Overeem, that was back when, Overeem was exceptionally young, and he wasn't as near the fighter back then as he is today. So, like I said, I just don't see how Werdum's gonna win this fight, other than by decision. Just by simply outscoring Roy Nelson. But Roy Nelson, I truly believe, can knock Werdum out or submit him. Matter of fact, I think that Big Country Nelson can dictate where this fight's going to go. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think he's going to be able to stuff Verdum's takedowns. I believe he's going to be able to pressure Werdum with those combinations, back him up against the fence, and possibly catch him. That's what I think. You know. And I think he'll be able to take Werdum down. Now, here's the thing with Roy Nelson. We have not seen Roy Nelson caught in anybody's guard, especially with a good guard, with the likes of Werdum. So, that is my one concern. If Roy Nelson decides to take Werdum down, does he stay in his guard? Does he pass to half? Does he go to side? I mean, what does he do? You know? Because like I said, Fabricio's guard is deadly. You saw what happened to Fedor. You know? So, I'm sure Nelson doesn't want to make that mistake. So, really, does that limit because he's hazardous to jumping into guard with Werdum? Does that take away him taking him down? Possibly. But for the most part, I think that Roy Nelson is going to want to look to knock Fabricio Werdum out. If I was a smart man, which I know I am. So, yeah, I think Roy Nelson is going to keep this fight standing up. And I just think that, you know, Nelson, he may not have the best footwork and head movement, but I think because he's the smaller man, I think he'll be able to get on the inside, and I think he'll be able to, you know, come over the top on Werdum and land that right hand, and I think he'll be able to go to the body and, you know, do some damage there. So, yeah, I just think that Roy Nelson, being that he has more ways to win and he can dictate where the fight goes, I think he's going to take this. You know, I know this is another upset, but hey, I'm a daredevil. You know, I'm bold like that. So, there you go. Yeah, so Roy Nelson, he's going to win the fight. I think he'll be able to knock Werdum out. I think it won't be easy. Of course it won't be easy, because Werdum is pretty mobile on his feet. I will give him credit. But I just think that Roy Nelson's going to pressure him, and it's going to leave some openings, and I think he'll end up catching Werdum on the chin, and the fight will be done. So there you go, Roy Nelson TKO. Let's go. All right, now the moment you've all been waiting for. Co-main event and the main event. First and foremost, the co-main event of the... Wait a minute. Is that the... That is the co-main event. What was I talking about? Okay, see, I'm all off guard today, people. I'm sorry. You know, it's raining outside. You know, the day has been kind of, you know, slow. Of course, you would expect that when it's raining outside, but yeah, excuse my offsetness today. I know that's not a word, but I just made it up. So anyway, the main event of the evening, that was the co-main event. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know that. But anyway, main event of the evening, the moment you've all been waiting for the UFC interim welterweight championship. And in my opinion, the fight of the night, unless something else happens. Nick Diaz going one-on-one with one of my personal favorites, and in my opinion, one of the most underrated welterweights ever, but I'm glad he's getting his just due now. The natural-born killer, Carlos Condit. Now, we know the storyline, we know the history, we know what these two have endured to get to this point, so there is no need to break that down or even tell that story again. Let's just talk about the fight. Now, basically, what's going to come down in this fight for either guy to win is for either Nick Diaz to take CANDID out of the fight mentally and psychologically, and for Carlos CANDID to avoid it. And what I mean on Nick Diaz's side when I say taking CANDID out of the fight mentally and physically is basically coming forward, landing those volume combinations, and basically wearing Carlos CANDID out. That is, if Carlos CANDID counters that and catches Nick Diaz, but cannot wobble Nick Diaz. Because we all know Nick Diaz has a super hard chin. It seems like he cannot be wobbled. It's like, you know, it's just like a rock'em sock'em robot. I know that's cliche, but that's what Nick Diaz is. A human rock'em sock'em robot. I mean, you know, you hit him and he falls back, but he comes right back up. And, you know, that frustrates a lot of guys. And watching Nick Diaz fights over the years, I would have at least thought he would have been knocked out by now, at least at this point in his career. But, you know, it's just something built inside of Nick Diaz that will not allow him to fall. You know, now I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm not saying that CANDID can't be the first guy to do it, because he can. It's just a matter of how. You know? But, I mean, you know, that's why the fight is signed, and that's why there's a pay-per-view, and that's why we're all going to witness it on Saturday, so we can all find out that answer. But yeah, if Carlos CANDID can't put Nick Diaz away standing up, then Carlos CANDID won't win the fight. Because, I mean, you're not going to submit Nick Diaz. I mean, you know, he's a seasoned jiu-jitsu black belt. I mean, so if Carlos CANDID, you know, can't end the fight standing up, then there's no way he can win the fight. The only hope he has, if he can't end the fight standing up, is to win the fight by decision. That's all. That's all. Now, as for Nick Diaz, same thing could be said about Carlos CANDID. Except that Carlos CANDID, if I believe Nick Diaz lands on the button, I think Carlos CANDID will fall. But Carlos CANDID is tough too, because we've seen him in some very risky situations. I mean, you know, from the Jake Ellenberger fight to the Roy McDonald fight, you know, we've seen Carlos CANDID on the edge of defeat. But, you know, Carlos CANDID, he's got that that Spartan, barbarian-like fighting spirit too, and it's hard to shake. But I believe, you know, with the amount of momentum that Diaz has behind those combinations, if he can land one right on the chops, then I think Carlos CANDID will fall. Bottom line, I believe Carlos CANDID will fall. Now, I've heard also, as I was watching the Countdown show, and it was very interesting that Carlos CANDID brought this up, is with Nick Diaz's style, it does leave him vulnerable to a lot of openings, which is true. Because Nick Diaz, you know, he really doesn't, you know, have a good solid guard. You know, he's kind of wide, and you know, he doesn't tuck his chin. You know, and he's kind of stands flat-footed, doesn't use any head movement or footwork or anything like that. So, you know, maybe Carlos CANDID knows something that we don't know. obviously. And he's obviously going to develop a game plan, striking wise, based off of that. And maybe that might be the blueprint to handling Nick Diaz on the feet. But then again, Nick Diaz put it best. If he's constantly coming forward at you with those machine gun like combinations, you know, you're only going to dodge so many. You know? I mean, really. You know, Nick Diaz starts pulling that trigger, man. You may dodge maybe 1 or 2 bullets, but you won't dodge them all. Eventually, some are going to land, and then there's going to be that one big one that lands, and you're going to be out cold. So I hope that Carlos Condit is aware of that. But basically, what I see is Nick Diaz from the start coming out trying to pour the pressure on Carlos Condit from the outset. And I see Carlos Condit trying his best to circle and try to move around and confuse Nick Diaz using leg kicks combined with high kicks and punches. So I think he's going to want to, you know, look to mix things up and, you know, just find openings. So I think we're looking at a very opportunistic Carlos Condit coming into this fight. That's basically what I see. So if Carlos Condit can be opportunistic and find a way to maneuver around Nick Diaz's pressure standing up, he can catch him. You know. Now, as far as the fight going to the floor, I think we got a stalemate there because Carlos Condit has very good sweeps, very good scrambles, as well as Nick Diaz does too. But I just think Nick Diaz's guard, I think, is a little bit better than Carlos's, just by a tad. You know, being that Nick Diaz is so tall, and you know, but I mean, Carlos is a tall guy too. But I mean, you know, if Carlos Condit is in Nick Diaz's guard, you know, I think the guy on the bottom, or whoever gets guard, I mean, whether Diaz is in Carlos's guard or, you know, vice versa, I think who's ever on the bottom, I think is going to get the advantage. That's what I think. Because both guys are tall, both guys have, you know, long arms and long legs, so, you know, I think any one of them could snatch up a submission at any given moment. But I think, you know, that's going to be a chess match there if the fight goes to the mat. Because, like I said, both guys, you know, do pretty well at sweeping and scrambling and getting back to their feet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if the fight does indeed go to the ground. But I think Carlos Condit is going to try to find a way to knock Nick Diaz out. And I think that's probably going to cost him. I think Condit should probably try to get this fight to the ground as much as possible and just try to submit Diaz. I think his best chances lie there. Because I just think with Nick Diaz's pace and his conditioning, and Carlos Condit has gotten tired in a lot of his fights too. So don't think that Nick Diaz does not know that. Carlos Condit has tired in some of his recent fights in the UFC. So I'm just making a little side note there to all of you, you know, that are just caught up in, you know, I guess the brawling aspect of the whole thing. You know, Carlos Condit, he's going to have to come in well conditioned to handle Nick Diaz on the feet, because Nick Diaz, he ain't going nowhere. You know, this is second nature to him. So yeah, I just think that, you know, Carlos Condit for some reason won't be able to, you know, constantly deal with that relentless pace that Diaz is going to set in the fight. And I think once Diaz starts landing those combinations, I think it's just going to be a little bit too much for Carlos to handle. I like Carlos Condit. I would like to see him win the fight. I would like to see either guy win the fight, but if I was betting on this fight, I have to go with Diaz. So And I think I'm gonna have to. You know what? I think I'm gonna have to pick Diaz. I'll pick him by TKO. I think he'll ground and pound Condit. I think he won't flush, knock him out, but I think he'll definitely rock him, and Carlos will fall, and he'll just keep pounding him till the referee stops it. So I'm going with Diaz. Probably, I say probably third or fourth round stoppage. But like I said, if Carlos can be opportunistic enough to avoid that pressure and look for openings, you know, with leg kicks and high kicks, and you know, using the jab and the knees and stuff, I think he can. I think he can knock Nick Diaz out. I think he can. But I think his best bet is going to the ground. So there you go. That's my prediction for the main event and the co-main event. I went over again. Sorry about that. I'm going to try to do a better job with shortening these MMA videos, but, you know, if I don't, oh well. That's how it goes. But anyway, y'all enjoy the fights, man. It's going to be terrific. And I think this is going to be probably one of the pay-per-views that we remember to start 2011. So get ready, because it's going to be something. But anyway, until then, two fingers like a player. I'm gone.